Today, we will talk about the analysis of the video of a game played by our own team. How many times we have had a very specific feeling when living the game live on the field, and then we have discovered a very different reality when we have gone over it again on the video. This happens very often. The analysis of the own games is a very useful practice since during the games we are full of emotions and our perception of the reality is highly influenced by them. 5 minutes of a very poor performance can look like 15, and our perception of the entire game can be affected by stages of the game that were not so long in terms of time, but maybe had a big impact in our emotional side, either from a positive or a negative perspective. For this reason, no matter what the outcome of the game has been, we need to look at the video with an open mind. Sometimes it will be difficult since we are forced to provide very immediate feedback after the game to the media, to the board, or to the players. And unconsciously, we will want to stick to our initial assessment of the game. But if we are not open to analyze the game from scratch, we will miss an invaluable opportunity to get a better understanding of our team. This post-analysis of the own game in cold, regardless the score, will give us the chance to get the following information. Firstly, a review of the opposition's strategic plan and behavior. Obviously, during the game, we will have learned a lot and made many conclusions about what we were able to successfully predict and what we missed. But now our perception will be much more accurate. This is an opportunity to learn and to improve our future analysis of the opposition. Secondly, and for me the most important factor, a reflection about the performance of our own team in this game, both from a collective and an individual perspective. We will go back to this one in a moment. And finally, we can understand how the team is evolving week after week. In football, the present moment is the only thing that really matters, but the dynamics can provide us with relevant information and warn us about potential issues before they happen. At this point, we have to mention the statistics and the data. In the other sorts of analysis, numbers can be relevant, but in my opinion, in this case, they are even more important, for they are a sort of alarm through which we can control the health of our own team. We need to measure the right numbers, and you know my opinion about this, and we also need to carry out a calibration process in which we set up what numbers are average and which ones can mean an outstanding or an underperformance. For example, if we are controlling the number of attacks in open spaces that we get in our own half, we might say that we cannot allow more than 4 per game as an average standard. Or we can just compare the evolution of the team, and if yesterday we allowed 8, today the goal is no more than 7. Some football software allows you to keep track of the dimensions of your affected space, the distances between the lines, or the gaps between the players. All this can help us to evaluate our performance in a specific game and to follow up the evolution along the time. These statistics, these ratios, can be the basement to start our analysis, and with practice, they might lead us to focus directly on specific scenarios of the game. With or without statistics to start with, we would obviously take our previous strategic plan as the main reference to carry out the analysis. In this strategic plan, we have our intentions for the game, the ideal world that was going to lead us to win the match. So what went right and what went wrong? And what else happened out of that plan? To go ahead with such analysis, firstly, we will need to identify what scenarios of the game, in the end, were key for the outcome of the match. Not which ones we expected to be, but the ones that ended up being more important. And once we've got them, the main positives and areas of improvement in each one of them. This is important since the coach will require things to improve when we win and a number of positive aspects when we lose. In this case, although we focus on the main ones, in the end, we should analyze our performance in all of the scenarios of the game, the 16, for this can be relevant when we are analyzing a specific tendency across different games. The analysis based on scenarios of the game is, in my opinion, a very powerful tool. Football is a very complex game, and it's much more than just score. We can lose a game 3-0, and after the right analysis of the 16 scenarios of the game, find out that we did quite well in 14 of them, and that we lost the game in just 2 scenarios. Well, in high performance, this might be irrelevant for the media, for the fans, and even for the board. But for us and for the players, can be a very important reflection to move forward. And even more if we are talking about youth football and development is over performance. As we saw in previous parts of the course, we will need to start our analysis in a more strategic and macro level. This means an analysis in terms of scenarios and intentions. For example, they tried to build up in a combinative manner and we pressed very high. We were unsuccessful, therefore they found spaces behind our defensive block and they created many chances from these situations in open spaces. And then we can continue by explaining more in depth the details. Following the example, our high pressing failed because we struggled to match their numbers in the midfield, and also a specific player didn't meet his defensive role and left additional spaces for the opposition to break away our defensive structure. Although we organize our analysis in scenarios of the game, we need to remember the principle of the chained actions. Therefore, we will need to link scenarios very often and jump from one to another. This will be normal and it is how it needs to be. And we cannot forget about the phases of the game and the turning points, how our team behaves and performs as the game evolves and the context changes will be essential in order to optimize our potential capacities. Once we have finalized the analysis, there's still a very important task to be done. We will need to decide when and how we will use the conclusions. There are mainly 3 potential destinations for them. Firstly, to be used directly in the coming week in order to reinforce the positive aspects or to work to improve the negatives. Secondly, some of our conclusions might be of great importance, but maybe they do not apply at all for the coming game. Let us say, for example, that we were terrible defending the long balls from the opposition. But in our next game, we do not expect this kind of situations at all. Maybe we just should keep this information for a further and more similar situation. Another example is if we played this game home and our games away are absolutely different. In this case, we may keep our conclusions to use them towards our next home game. A third example, if the conclusions are very linked to the opposition and we decide to keep them for our next game against this team. And finally, all the conclusions which are not so important because we will not be able to use all the information and we will need to be selective. As we said, this information must stay there at disposal in order to use it to draw tendencies about the performance of the team along the season. And what about the individual perspective? We will provide more details in the next session of the course. See you then. Thank you.